2, 1. Take it away, Michael.
Okay, welcome back to the Four Corners. This is our third installment, again with Mazzy, Michael, and Michael. But today with a very, very special guest. Today we have Steve Carlson, without his cat, I've heard, but still with Steve.
Yeah.
And today we are talking about collecting vinyl. Collecting vinyl sometimes over very long periods, sometimes over shorter periods, and sometimes with traumatic events. This is one reason we shared Steve amongst us for today. And as it is a good tradition on the Four Corners, our guest shall start. And now I give it to you, Steve. Tell us about what happened, how your vinyl collecting goes nowadays. And so we go round and talk about times and vinyl collecting.
Very good. Thank you, Michael, Mazzy, and the guy with the letter S. So, yeah, back in this year, as most know, I had the flood, came in, and it wiped out. In fact, I still got houses in the neighborhood. They're not, they're still condemned. I was lucky. I didn't get condemned or anything, but we had 7 feet of water, and out went 40, 50 years of record collecting. So it's starting over. And at the very end, my last record, we're going to talk about that because a lot of this starting over, these three have influenced, in all honesty. You all three have been a big part of that changing how I collect and emptying my pocketbook. So, but how it really, when I first started, and again, I watched this video from Mazzy. You talked about 45s, and I was a paper boy, and all I could afford was, 45s. But when I got my first job, I began to buy albums. And there was a thing called, Mazzy, you'll know this, Columbia Record Club. For 1 penny, you got 13 albums. This was like the biggest record collection in the world. Suddenly you get 13 albums. Now, the other thing was there was a card they would send you all the time. And if you didn't send that back in, they're going to send you the record of the month. I procrastinated like hell, but it was a good thing. So one of the very first things they sent me was this one here. That's Jethro Tull, Minstrel in the Gallery. No clue who Jethro Tull was. I'm probably 14 or whatever. I've never heard of this. I look at this album and go, what is this? God's bless. I should have sent in the card. I put it on the first time, didn't like it. Second time, I liked it better. It was at that time where you didn't have many records, so you played them over and over. And I fell in love with this. This is my favorite Tull album, and I became a lifelong Jethro Tull fan. Because I just couldn't get it right on sending in a card. It was just way too difficult for me to put a damn stamp on the thing and send it in. I had Parliament's Funkadelic, a Parliament album. Clones of Dr. Funkenstein came in. I'm in a town of 3,000 people. Nobody has heard of Funkenstein there or Parliament. And suddenly I'm like, well, I think I'm cool. Obviously it didn't work out. But the other one I wanted to show, so, Columbia Record Club. The other thing, I didn't know anything about music. I really didn't. So I'm at the Ben Franklin store in Schuyler, Nebraska, town of 3,000. Ben Franklin had this little box of records. And I'm looking, and I don't have a clue about any records. So a friend comes in, name's Mike Grubbs. They owned the grocery store. And believe it or not, this was their this was their motto. Good grub at Grubbs. Good stuff. And I asked, what should I buy? And he goes, well, this one. He pulls out, it's called Led Zeppelin. I go, well, who's Led Zeppelin? This is like 1976 now. I've never even heard of Led Zeppelin.
That's your first.
And so I bought this. And it's like, wow. Achilles' Last Stand came on. And I just thought that was just the most amazing music I had ever heard. I was blown away. Just incredible. And it totally opened my eyes. It was really the beginning. My older brother went to college. He came back. He said Pink Floyd. He talked about Alan Parsons Project. He was cheap, so he wouldn't spend any money. I bought them all. but it began to, that's really when I started to collect and start to learn a lot more about it. So Mike Grubbs, if you're out there, thanks. And Columbia Record Club. It's just, God, I got a lot of stuff from them. And you know what? I was in Columbia Record Club until they finally shut it down. I never left it.
That's where they charged you list price.
Yes.
So $2 or $3 more than you could get it in your local store, because that's how they got you.
Absolutely.
We used to think the way to get those 13 free.
I was the perfect candidate, man. So that's mine.
But you got 10 for a penny.
I did. And they were like all greatest hits. I'm looking at this. I don't know any of them. Helen Reddy, I Am Woman. I got that one. I knew the song. That was it. You know, Cat Stevens' greatest hits. Seals and Crofts' greatest hits. Yeah.
People used to try to put their neighbor's address on those and intercept the package when it went to the neighbor next door. I never did that, but I've heard that people have done that.
Yeah.
So at some point, did it change from vinyl to CD in the Columbia?
Eventually it did. Yes. In the 90s. But
it was the RCA and the BMG Record Club too, CDs.
Yep. I did BMG later on.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how that's how I started really collecting. Next.
10 records for 1 pence?
1 penny. How could you go wrong? You're a kid. This is the greatest thing in the world.
It's like hooking you on to drugs. They start you with a little drug and you get hooked in methadone or heroin or something, you know. Here, little boy. You know, then you're stuck.
Every magazine, Boys Life, everything had Columbia Record Club in it, you know. So, I mean, it was tempting you, and they'd put all the kind of the cool albums. So, yeah,
I remember getting Crazy Horse's first album and Ladies of the Canyon, Joni Mitchell, when I signed up in 71, I guess, 72, something like that.
It was a good way to start.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Michael in Texas, your turn.
Okay, so I was telling Mazzy, similar to Steve, I didn't have a lot of Beatles albums, didn't have any. I grew up listening to the Beatles from my father at home all the time. I'm a child of the 80s, so when I was a kid, this is what you put in your car and what was in the little boombox.
What is that?
Cassette tape. This album in particular, Paul Simon's Graceland, was one that never left my mother's car for whenever it came out in 86, I believe, until about 1990. So after a year of this, every day on the way to and from school, I had this whole thing memorized. So this is one of the earliest albums that got me going. So cassette tapes, I got, into all the 80s thrash stuff and Iron Maiden, and that was like my earliest musical memory. My first LP I ever got was for Christmas. I was 5 years old, Michael Jackson's Thriller with the gatefold with the white tiger, and on a Fisher-Price plastic kids turntable. But soon thereafter, graduating to the vinyl, just getting the stuff that I knew that I enjoyed. Paul Simon, and this is in Southern California, and there was this shop called Sam Goody, was in the mall. And one day we were in there and they were playing this album, and I was like, "What in the world is this?" My dad asked the clerk what it was. This is a kind of a new age record. It's all analog synthesizer, but it was this mixed with thrash metal, mixed with Paul Simon. So my musical upbringing was very strange. And then from those worlds, getting into punk and hardcore. So that was kind of how I started. I got a real turntable when I was in high school, and I started I would go into lots of punk shows, go into a lot of club shows around, picking up 7 inches where I could, because they're $3 or $5 at the local shop, and when I'm making $10 every 2 weeks for mowing the yard and cleaning out the garage, that's all I could afford. But my earliest collection period started when I was in high school, with punk and rock and alternative and that kind of thing. Moving forward into my adulthood, being able to get a nicer turntable, and then In college, listening to indie rock. In late high school, this band Tortoise, it's a Chicago band, instrumental kind of avant jazz, experimental rock. This is the album that kind of broke me out of the headspace of like traditional rock and pop sensibilities, and introduced kind of a more experimental, avant-leaning ideology toward music. I would do my homework my senior year in high school and just flip this on my cheap turntable over and over and over again and wear it out. And then going into college, this is still in the age where the internet was in its infancy. I remember putting a $5 bill in an envelope and sending it to a label, and them I said, send me, the newest 7-inch that you released. And then they would send the 7-inch with a little flyer of the other releases they had. So I would pick a few more, and, every few weeks I would buy, just sending cash in the mail, which just seems crazy nowadays. But moving forward through college and seeing more bands and getting into playing music and writing music myself, just my tastes and interests just go all over the place. So
Yeah.
that's sort of a bare bones run through my journey.
Do you still have all those 45s that you sent the cash in for?
Most of them, yes.
Wow.
I got rid of the ones that were I didn't like or I would never listen to, but actually Michael Ludwig's got me on the vinyl storage solution sleeves that, gosh, they just make the covers pop.
Yeah.
We'll eventually get those for everything. But kind of like you guys, Steve said your buying and your collecting habits have been influenced by us, and likewise to you all. And guys like BarakaPDub and Steve and Mazzy and Army In, the old German guy, he used to show all the audiophile jazz. That that kind of just showed me, oh, there's these beautiful recordings that maybe sound better than the original pressing. And so getting into the audiophile repressing labels, Analog Productions and Music Matters notably as the ones where it's like, oh, this costs twice as much, but oh, it sounds 4 times better than a digital repress, So it's been fun kind of to navigate that. And going back to, I never listened to jazz or old music ever. To me, I didn't listen to music from before 1975 until I was a grown adult out of college on my own. Like, oh, who's Duke Ellington? Who is John Coltrane? Who is, all these people. So it's been really fun to kind of go backward and listening through and sampling online all these musicians. Like, oh, I've heard of Thelonious Monk. What is his music like? And like, now, I get a sense of that. Now, which album of his is like the best? And of that album, what's the best pressing? It's just really fun to learn and to kind of discover music in a fresh way like that, and being led along the way in the right paths. And once you trust someone's taste, it's like anything Michael Ludwig says sounds good. I know it's going to sound good because he has a high standard for the sonic fidelity. So it's a lot.
We're recording this on October 10th, and it just happened to be Thelonious Monk's birthday.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
There you go.
Perfect.
Happy birthday, Thelonious Monk.
Yes.
Mazzy, your turn.
Okay, it all comes down to the Beatles for me, right? Those of you who watch my channel. However, the 245s I remember my mother buying. I didn't have a record player, and I'm trying to think what year this would have been, 60, 61, 62. I didn't research this, but the 2 singles my mother bought, which was bizarre, Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Book, a Dot Bikini, and The Purple People Eater. And of course, they're both novelty songs. So when you're 9 years old, 8 years old, whatever that was, it was amazing. And then, of course, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but the Ed Sullivan Show happened. I had heard I Want to Hold Your Hand on the radio. That was a single. And my mother worked at a department store near Stanford University called The Emporium. And I asked her if she could get me the Beatle album. I've showed another video. She brings me an album called The Bugs, Liverpool Sound, The Bugs, cover band doing the Liverpool Sound. I said, it's the wrong album, the Liverpool Beat. And then she went back, she said, keep it. And she went back and got me Meet the Beatles. Well, the obsession began. Everything to this day is influenced by the growing up parallel. Think about it, from 9.5, 10 years old, up until the Beatles split up in 1970, that perfect decade, growing up with the Beatles, 13 getting bar mitzvahed, going out there. And it became obviously the music, but then I got turned on to classical music because of Wagner and because of Beethoven on Help, and then it got into Indian music with George Harrison and avant-garde with Yoko Ono and the Fluxus. And to this day, it's been the constant thing in my life, the memories. And it also has been an obsession. So all I'm going to show here, because of the obsessive part of it, I've become a Beatle collector of various pressings. And so I only picked one album for the sake of this video. I'm not going to go through every one, but these is almost my entire Sgt. Pepper collection on vinyl, not including CDs. And I think I'm missing 4 or 5 that are in these other box sets. These are my Pepper albums. Jeez. And you ask, what the? I'm going to try not to.
I agree.
What the? Anyway, a Punch mono copy. And I'll just go through a couple of them. Someone gave me this one, has their name on it, Mary Pico Todd. A mono American, and it gives stereo American. And then it goes into reissue from the last few years. This is a 2017 QRP press they did. This is the double album with the demo stuff. This is a 70s American picture disc. This is a British 70s picture disc. This is the recent picture disc. This is a UK original tube cut mono. This is a remastered version. This is a Japanese with Obi. Oh, I'm sorry, this is another UK mono tube cut. This is a French box set edition, Japanese box set edition. The roll top that came out in the 80s, just when Capitol finally changed over from the Capitol American configurations to the UK configurations, right when the CDs came out. The last hurrah of vinyl, I bought one whole set of vinyl thinking there's not going to be vinyl ever again. The Mo-Fi, which I'm not a fan of, from the Mo-Fi box. And lastly, the recent mono box from 5-6 years ago, which is incredible, from Analog Tapes. And then, of course, there's the big box with CD and mono thing. So I'm obsessed with that, but it got me, and everyone's laughing. And this is where hashtag obsessive compulsive.
Yeah.
If it's a cover variation, it's about the art too, especially when Sgt. Pepper happened, because that's when rock criticism, in a way, was invented. Time magazine puts the Beatles on the cover. Peter Blake, who was this sort of modernist collage artist, creates the concept to cover a Sgt. Pepper. Michael Cooper photographed that, who also later that year photographed the Stones' Satanic Majesty's Request. It became an art form, and it was the first time from American point of view that the Beatle and the UK records configuration were exactly the same. Up until then, the Beatles, America Capitol put out 3 albums for every 2 records the Beatles actually made. Instead of 14 tracks, they cut them back to 12. They put the singles on. The Beatles tried to give their fans value. So the singles on all the early Beatle albums were never on the record. So I became obsessed, and I am still to this day collecting all this stuff. So that's how my collection started. As I said in that current 1966 video that's up, 1964, 5, I was just mostly buying singles except for the Beatles. They're the only albums I bought. Starting in 66, that was that crossover year where I started buying albums, Parvin the Raiders and the Monkees. The Monkees were a big part of that, and the whole garage band stuff. So that's when things shifted. I didn't have a stereo in my room initially. My parents had a big hi-fi in the living room. And on Christmas 64, my parents gave me one of those Magnavoxes where you pull it down, has the changer and the speakers pivoted. That and the Beatles 65 album that came out Christmas 64, Hanukkah 64, I should say. So that was my introduction to record buying. And then it became an obsession in the late 60s into the 70s, working in record stores, where I was able to get a lot of records cheap or free.
But may I ask you something? Did you ever consider in this early time that there may be difference how those editions sounds, that there are better one or
it was
one?
never. In fact, you know, this whole thing about now, sometimes I joke about it because I go on the Hoffman forums like some of you may, and there's this so obsession about it now. And I totally get that. But in the 70s, when we were buying these records, we didn't think, oh my God, this pressing doesn't sound like that, that this is a hot, we didn't know what a hot press was. I didn't know about, you know, in fact, when I got rid of 2,000 of my 6,000 albums in 1995, because a CD is the better format, I got rid of all my Led Zeppelin records thinking, oh, I like Led Zeppelin, I'm going to get those on CD. I kept my Beatles, I kept my Kinks, I kept my Byrds, but most of the other stuff I got rid of, music from Big Pink and these things. And I'm sure I had a copy. I had the very first pressing of the Led Zeppelin. I'm sure I have an RL and like my record's always been in pristine shape. So I got rid of records that would have been total wonderful collector's items today. And again, I played them on this stacking Magnavox, which I stacked, you know, 5 records at a time, let them plop, let them play. My records to this day that I have of those, they sound really good. Some of them have surface noise, but a lot of them don't. Because I don't even have a lot of Ringware records unless I buy a used copy like that. So no.
Do you have any other albums that you've gotten so many versions of?
Well, Beatles especially, because I think I have this many Revolver. That Revolver's my favorite Beatle album. I finally, just recently, for the first time in the last 2 years, got a 1968 mono top loader of the Beatles' White Album with the top with the black insert, which sounds great. It's a little surface noise on that one, and I think I paid $50 for that, or $60, which is actually a good deal for that record. The mono original top loader. That's how they came out in the UK. But not any other artists. I don't know. Beatles are my only obsession in terms of ongoing, and I've limited it to that on purpose. Maybe I have 3 copies of another album, like, you know, a few others, Dylan, Mo-Fi type things.
You did check off all the boxes on obsession, so congratulations.
It's true, but I keep them nicely organized, and you know, I have about 1,000 Beatle-related records, including the Beatles, solo, cover records, box sets, family members, you know, Sean, Julian, Yoko. That's how if you've seen, there's videos of my wall or I call it the monolith, the Beatle monolith. So.
That's great.
Michael from Germany.
My turn. Okay. No Beatles. Sorry. My first records I can't show. I bought some, not particular stuff. I think my first record was Deep Purple, made in Japan. My grandmother bought it to me, and I got rid of a lot of my vinyls because my personal flood was my father. When I had to go to the university, I put a lot of my records in his garage, and then he needs the space for the golf bag, and then my vinyls were gone, because they are worthless, and we have CDs nowadays. So my vinyls were gone. I kept a few, and the real getting into music or getting into vinyl was around this time.
Oh yeah.
Joy Division, Closer, but there was no choice. You know, there was no choice. What do I collect now? Of course, if you want to get into music. Pardon?
1984, is that right?
Around, yeah. Of course, vinyl. What else? What else? And that's when I started buying vinyls. But I never considered in that time as collecting something, just buying music. Right. You had the radio and you had vinyl. Yeah, okay, of course you had audio cassettes, but usually in my area, you made your own audio cassettes from your vinyls. And by the way, I sold cassettes I did from my vinyl to a very hip cafe in Düsseldorf, and he gave me money, and I could buy new vinyl and make a new cassette. That was so I built up quite a collection. Yeah, and then university starts. We are now talking 87, 88, and I totally lost my interest for music or vinyl. I just went into my university stuff and was out of vinyl for the next 10, 20, 25 years.
Wow.
25 years, no vinyl. And then then I came back to vinyl and started with avant-garde electronic music in early 2017. And I did a lot of those electronic music stuff. I liked it, I loved it. My wife hates it, or hated it. And but still, I bought some Morphys and analog productions from titles. I thought they are essential. Those are essential titles. Bob Dylan. I remembered in my very, very early youth, Bob Dylan was important. And so I bought a Morphy Bob Dylan, and then I said, wow, oh my, great. And suddenly I recognized that I'm only listening to my 10, 15, 20 audiophile records and not to my electric stuff. And so I decided to do this transformation, get back to the classic, get back to the audiophile. And I recognized from my personal point of view, when it gets to vinyl in the 2020s, that the only reason to get into this format has so many inconveniences compared, for example, I did it a long time, compared to streaming. Streaming is much more convenient, but it's all about the quality. And there is a kind of quality and a kind of lifestyle and the cover art and everything. Only, in my opinion, only vinyl can provide that to you. And that's why I am now knee deep into vinyl.
Yeah. You went big. Go big or go home. Wow.
Well, I love that. I mean, that's part of the reason, Michael, I was attracted to your channel at first and watching it, because a lot of us will show this MoFi thing, and now everyone's on the Tone Poet kick, which I'll show too, or Music Matters Jazz, but pretty much you've zoomed in, you've lasered focused that, which makes it this special thing, not better or anything, just different. And you want that kind of stuff, we know to go to you. We're not going to get a silly whack-a-mole shit or something else. We know that's going to be wonderful. And I've learned a lot about that. I love that. I mean, just as everyone said, we love seeing that line of orange spines above you, or the different, thing. It's like those Japanese cafes or bookstores where everything is just perfectly organized. I love that.
Yeah, but for me goes the same that goes for Michael in Texas. I got into that stuff from guys like you, Mazzy, from guys like you, Steve, from guys like BarakaPDub. You put me onto this. You showed me that there is great quality stuff out there, and that makes sense. If Mazzy, you sometimes say it all comes down to the music. This is, of course, you say that. I think if I hear it, okay.
Except when you got 40 copies of Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah, but it's not the complete truth when it comes to vinyl. If it all comes down to the music, only to the music, we can go over to Spotify, I think. Because it's easier, it's cheaper, you have the music there. I think we are vinyl lovers in a way, and that's a bit different.
There's a gut feeling I don't get on streaming, and I'm not one that streams, so I don't know that. In the car, I listen to NPR or my CarPlay from my own digital files.
Exactly.
From
All
those codes that Mr. Carlson here wishes he didn't give away every Sunday morning are in my car. I'm kidding. I'm good.
Well, there's such a tactility with the physical object of a record. When you see a record and you grab it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can smell. When you smell the record, you see the gloss, you feel it with your fingers, you open it, and it becomes this kind of totem, and it really serves this kind of ritualistic, you know, it's kind of a thing where certain times of day and certain days of the week and certain moods you have, oh, I kind of feel kind of mellow this morning or tonight, I'm gonna make a drink and put on Duke Ellington and just kind of chill out. And I mean, yes, you can choose your music on Spotify, but there's not that direct engagement with the object that I feel like is an important part of it.
You know the term sense memory? It's mostly used in acting, like Stanislavski and the acting thing. And I have this sense memory. You use something that you remember and you use it to create your character and to create where you're going. And I, to this day, can smell what Sgt. Pepper smelled like when it first came out. It was different. Obviously, I didn't think in those days, oh, it's the fucking ink going up my nose, you know, all those chemicals. It was the best smelling, most unique smelling album. It was a combination of this colored insert, this printing insert. Seriously, you know, this amazing, you know, this is my exact copy, mono copy. Oh, actually, I had a stereo first. So I went stereo before I went that. But there's something about that smell. 53 years later, I still smell.
Wow.
And I'm using that on you guys right now.
The record smells, you mean? Not you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But Steve, let me ask you one thing.
This doesn't smell musty like, you know, the things you smell in an old used record store. And I always joke about, I'm tired of that filthy mildew, musty smell. That's why what's great about Michael's way of collecting.
But Steve, let me ask you one thing. I'm very eager to hear that. When you have this event, you know, most of my collection is destroyed. I have to carry it out, and it's terrible. Yeah. Have you ever considered to stop collecting vinyl, or was that never a question?
It never in a million years, because it's an obsession. Music is, it's what makes me happy. I don't watch TV. I used to watch more, but now it's just what I like. It gives me absolute joy. There's so much music in the world. I couldn't ask for anything else. You know, it's like, Michael, you're talking about, you know, how much an album, you know, how the importance, how big it is. It's just the feel of it. I wouldn't even get into CDs until I couldn't get albums anymore, because I love the feel, the size of the album, the artwork. And I said, I don't need CDs. And then eventually Columbia House quit having them, BMG quit having albums. My record store was a CD store. I couldn't buy records anymore, and I had to go to CDs. But to me, I couldn't imagine living without music. I just couldn't, and without this form, not the radio. Never.
Interesting, very interesting. And but you have been into CD. You have.
I had to. I had no choice, and we'll go to that. It's quite the story.
Okay. It's your
next,
turn.
I'm next. All right. My next, when my collecting changed, was in the early 80s. I had a friend come over to my house to look at my record collection, because I was proud of my record collection. I just thought I got the greatest record collection in the world. It's probably a couple hundred albums. He looks it over and then looks at me and goes, "Your record collection sucks." Now, when you tell someone that's your collection, it's like someone tells you that, you go, "Oh man, them are fighting words." He goes, "You got nothing good." So he goes, "I'm going to bring you some albums that I want you to listen to." So he went home and he came back, and one of them was the Cramps. He introduced me to the Clash, to the Sex Pistols, to Stiff Little Finger, to Joe Jackson. It's what he was listening to. Music I had no idea about. And I became obsessed with it, with just the 70s, the punk, the energy. It's the greatest songwriting, probably not. Does everyone know how to play their instruments? No. But this is the cramps the Lord, the songs the Lord taught us. I just bought me an OG copy yesterday that's going to come, because it was my second favorite album of all time.
Wow.
But this changed how I was buying records. Suddenly now I went to record shows. Where I lived in Nebraska, we really didn't have much in the way of record shows. I now lived in the big state of Iowa, so Iowa has record shows. And I began doing that. And then I bought Rolling Stone magazine. And I didn't subscribe to Rolling Stone magazine till in the early 80s. And the record reviews that I would read, like Los Lobos, I learned about Los Lobos through Rolling Stone, Elvis Costello, all this stuff. And it changed how I now bought music. And so my habits, I still like what I was buying, but I began to expand now to buy more things, more different things, and really look for things like this. The other thing that made a big difference is I got a record review book. And I began, Michael, in Germany, you talked about when you went out finding the essential albums. That's what you wanted to do. That's what this did. And I began looking. If it had 5 stars, I might not know the group. Bob Dylan, I might not know it, but it has 5 stars. I better try to see if I can get it. And I really took this. And I got into blues. I got into Zydeco. There was a lot of different things I got into because this said it's great. Now, they could have been full of crap. I've read some of the reviews now, that some albums that they said were garbage. And I go, gosh, I love this album. If I didn't buy it because they said it was crap. So I kind of listened to these guys a lot. But it did help me. And my collection totally began to change now as I began to look for more important things. And that's where the record shows help. Van Morrison. Didn't really know about him. Began reading this. This guy's important. He put some good stuff out. And I loved him. So to this day, well, obviously, I lost all my books and I've been buying them back because I just find them fascinating to look at. And it's all about music, right? It's reading and learning. Videos, VC has really changed this a lot now because, like all three of you will talk about records I don't know. You write them down, you start looking, costs you a lot more money too. But that's in the 80s. Rolling Stone magazine, this Rolling Stone record guide, and Jeff Bigelow, who said, my record collection sucks, kind of changed how I began to buy music. And and it really got me big time into punk. Not that hardcore, Michael and Austin, like you, but 70s punk.
The Bigelow effect.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, but you need some points or some pillars where you can orientate around. It's very important. For me, it's the same today. If I see this Blue Note is out as a Music Matters, I probably give it a chance. Otherwise, I may even not know that this record is out there. You need those kind of books or people to communicate with, of course.
That period that Steve that you're talking about was a pivotal shaking up period, late 70s in San Francisco and in LA and in New York in the early 80s really shook things up quite a bit. And I think one suggestion about record collecting, which thank God, except for getting rid of some of my vinyl because of the format, is the biggest mistake I find some people make is, oh, I'm out of country music now, or I've grown out of punk. I want to get rid of those records and I'm going to get into this. And because I'm your elders of the four of you, your tastes go through circular motions and they evolve. You'll get into punk. Like the last few years, I'm into this loud music again, like energetic punk and not metal, but a little more harder stuff, industrial noise stuff that I was into when I would go to these events and Throbbing Gristle and weird avant-garde stuff. I'm going through that the last 2 or 3 years again. And a lot of the stuff I saved, luckily I didn't get rid of because I'm not in the mood right now. if unless you have to sell it, keep those things, because you're going to come back to it. You might be tired of the Beatles for 10 years or something. You'll get back to it possibly.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mazzy, I kind of disagree in a way, because what we are living in different times now. If you take Throbbing Gristle is not your typical vinyl band. They did their stuff usually on audio cassettes. And nowadays they make a lot of remaster and reissues on vinyl. But if I love Throbbing Gristle and love them for 5 years, I want to hear them. Nowadays I can hear them all over the place, over at YouTube and on digital sources, over and over.
If you choose to do that, I have those 2 albums, the one that emulates the Martin Denny Exotica record and the 20 Jazz Funk Grace. Those albums I bought when they first came out, and I have my original copy. But literally they're pristine because I didn't play them for 25 years, and now I've been playing them again. So we all do different. I'm not going to go listen to that on YouTube. I don't want to. I'll put it on when I'm in the mood. It's when you're in the mood for something. But that's why we all have these different kind of directions and evolutions about that. Definitely.
I'm curious, in terms of aside from the record clubs where you're getting stuff in the mail or sending off a catalog to get records back, buying it in shop, obviously. So pre-internet, did you all buy a lot of records at concerts of bands you went to go see?
I rarely went to a concert, and I just never seemed to have. For me, no. But I never went to that many concerts.
You know, I went to a lot of concerts and a lot of club shows. And to be honest with you, up until the 90s even, there weren't a lot of merch. The bands never had merch tables back then. You could buy T-shirts. The event would have T-shirts, but it was never like a friend or the wife or the girlfriend or the boyfriend of the band selling the shirts at the venue. It just didn't happen. So I went. Luckily, in San Francisco, we had a rough trade. That was the only rough trade in America at the time. So on 6th Street. So I'd buy. You know, I wish I still had it. Like I bought it because of the title, a Surgical Penis Clinic, 45, which is this. You probably know, maybe heard of them. Everyone's going to be Googling that right now. I don't think you want to Google that, but that was a band. And I remember buying that picture sleeve at just because of the name. And apparently now it's really a rare single and worth hundreds of dollars. I don't have it anymore.
And so now with the advent of the internet and being able to look at a website and in Michael Ludwig's case, you know, get a box of 15 records shipped from Kansas from Acoustic Sounds. And also with the pandemic, like what are your thoughts on the enjoyment or the collectability through the lens of being in a physical shop, looking for a certain thing, the time it takes, and, you know, to do that versus the instant gratification of going to Discogs and saying, oh, here's this OG copy of the Cramps, buy, you know, and then 5 days later it's at your doorstep. Do you all still hold kind of like a nostalgia and sentiment to walking into a record shop and looking for something and finding it, and just that? I always loved that feeling, because you never know who walked in there 2 days before and offloaded a bunch of records, offloaded all their Throbbing Gristle LPs, you know?
You know, Michael,
what are your
just
thoughts on...
a week ago, I walked into one down in Toledo, Ohio, and on the wall was the OG First Stooges. And it was in such perfect condition. Well, I had to get that. And I'll look at the wall. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always seem to be pressed for time, and I never have the time to sit there and really look through the racks like I want to look through. But I'm looking for some of the nice stuff that are usually displayed on the wall, and then there's certain artists that I would look at, and I really, really like that. Due to the fact that I lost so many really great albums that I like, and understanding that, you know, I'm closer to being dead than having a whole bunch more Closer. I know you got me by a little bit.
I'm 5 years closer than you, or
Yeah.
40, whatever.
And so I don't, like this cramps. I may never see that out there. And I thought, here it is. It's a price. I'll see if he'll go lower, which they did. And so for me, that was worth it. If I found that on the wall, I would be ecstatic. I mean, it totally excites me when I go into a record store and you see that there. I go, man.
I pretty much stopped, I shouldn't say stop completely, but buying used records just for the sake of used records. And obviously the pandemic has changed things. I think there's one used record, I forgot what it was now, that I wanted to get for my collection I bought in the last 7 months. I bought a shitload of new things between the Tone Poets and Music Matters Jazz and the analog, I mean, the archival stuff, plus just new releases like the Nude Party and a few other like indie bands that I'm still interested in, or things that or we'll get into. I have a pile here of Analog Africa, which is part of my, that I know Steve is into also. But I got tired of just buying those other things. I don't have any grails anymore, I don't think. Have you seen my collection? I have about 6,000 albums. I'm trying to get them. I'm halfway through getting them all on Discogs, which has taken a
Wow.
shit show. And the archivist, my friend Amanda, really kind of kicked me in the butt to do that, saying, Mazzy, you got to really start doing this. And now I'm I haven't done it in about 2 months, but I did it for a long time. I got them done. It's hard starting, but once you start, you get the hang of it, so.
Those Sgt. Pepper albums will take forever. I mean, it was like 500.
I started my Beatles and I got through 10, and I swear to God, they're the hardest because of the Matrix and the press. So I'm saving that till last. I did all my jazz are there, half my other stuff, and the Beatles will be the rest of my collection. I'm at M's now and my main wall, and then the Beatles. That's going to be a shit show. But for insurance purposes, I own my house, I have insurance, and I'm looking at, I'm halfway through. My medium price right now is $70,000. My high price is $200,000, and that's half my catalog.
Yeah.
I need to up my homeowners, my rider.
That's something.
And see, my insurance company wouldn't allow me to put my records on, and I was going to get some special insurance just for them. I procrastinated maybe just a little bit too long on that because I had everything in Discogs.
I have a rider, but I think it's low, but it's still decent.
Yep.
So have you allocated all of your new record acquisitions, Steve, into Discogs over the past 5 months?
I have about 300 in there, and I have more to go because people have sent me a lot of stuff, and so I'm slowly working that. Yeah, I'm not going as hard as when I originally went on Discogs. It took me 9 months to put everything on there. I had all my CDs put in, all the records. Now it's just as I get to it, anything new that comes in, I put it right away. Yeah.
For me, Discogs is very important tool in every way. The record store thing in Germany doesn't fit for me. Because if you go into a German record store and say, do you have mobile fidelity, analog productions? Say, what? They really don't know what you're talking about. So Discogs is a great information source. And I put my collection also inside the Discogs database, and it helps a lot. It really helps a lot to evaluate the stuff you don't get on the free market or in the stores over at Acoustic Sounds, for example. You have to. I don't like eBay, so I look on Discogs. How much is it? Does it make any sense to buy it now? How many copies are out there? And when I started coming back to vinyl, Discogs was the first database who showed me how many pressings are out there sometimes. Yeah. Take your Sgt. Peppers. I think it's over 500 pressings of Sgt. Peppers.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Pink Floyd.
Michael in Austin.
Led Zeppelin.
I think it's your turn, Michael. You should go. But just the one thing I'll say, which is the other great site is Bandcamp. going to getting artists directly for the most part, or indie labels. I try to support Bandcamp as artists through Bandcamp whenever possible, especially when they have those Fridays where the artist gets 100% of the profits, and especially during the pandemic here and there. That's where I got hooked up with Analog Africa when I couldn't find titles originally, which we'll get into. So, Austin.
Sorry, I missed it. What am I supposed to be talking about here?
Your next, you have more to show?
Oh yeah, sure.
Records.
Sorry.
Records.
We have for records.
Austin, you're supposed to show me copies of Sgt. Pepper, Michael.
Yeah,
you don't have any.
I was gonna say, so going through and just learning about the old music to me, the music that was made 60, 70 years ago that I've seen it, but I've never listened to it. Discovering the old music and like, oh yeah, I've heard of Blue Note Records. What's that? And like picking up a record and like, oh, this guy's named Lee Morgan. Like, interesting. What other albums has he made? And then you realize, oh, there's 20 records that he played on, or 40 records, and like there's just such a deep well of music from that era that, I mean, I feel like I've been hard listening and collecting jazz for the last 3 or 4 years, and I feel like every day hear about some artist, or from Michael Ludwig's, he's showing these the Electric Recording Company of Tommy Flanagan overseas. Like, I've never once seen that shown on the VC. I've never seen it in a shop. I've never seen anyone playing it. It's like, I just found this record that's whatever, 65, 70 years old, that I've never heard. It's just that discovery is so valuable and so fun, and it makes me feel so alive when you hear that music, and you hear, especially just the physical feeling of hearing the sound in your ears, like just the elation that comes with that it's incredible. But going back, finding these old albums, like I've heard of Chet Atkins, of course, as a guitarist. I knew his name, but you listen to this album, it's incredible music. It's this is I think this is a Classic Records one, but just finding the good versions, and then especially if you can find one that, oh, this was pressed from the analog tapes and it's still affordable or still in stock. I'm not going to try to wait for a near mint copy of an album from 1960 and spend $1,000 when I can buy one for $35 that maybe sounds twice as good. But just the joy and the fun in going down all these rabbit holes and finding what makes me feel alive and being moved by the music, it's just that's the most valuable thing for me as a collector and in listening. And I think that I've shown my system once before, but I had a friend design and build this shelving system for me. And at the time I was really getting into jazz, and over the 4 months it took her to make it, I already outgrew it. So that's one thing I'm also curious. I mean, Mazzy, you have a wall of CDs. Steve, I know you used to have a full room full of records. Michael, you have these beautiful shelves. I mean, at some point there has to be a limit. I mean, I'm about to move cross country, so now I'm trying to figure out how do you move a vinyl. I don't have anywhere near the collections you all do, but even with my 500, 600 records, how do you move it?
Yes, exactly, Mazzy.
You have white walls there, Mike.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Michael, I've moved quite a bit in my life, but company moved me, so I had movers come in to pack everything. And a couple of years ago, I had a flood. It was only a foot down there, so I didn't lose anything, but we had to get rid of we had to redo everything. I hired 3 men in a truck, or 2 men in a truck, to come in and pack up all my albums because it was too much to do. And all my CDs, they packed it all up. I wasn't going to mess with it. I'll unpack them, but
do you
I'm
all
hoping
have to,
during this pandemic to pitch a show to HGTV and get paid to go into people's houses and have them organize their record walls and record units and have custom things built and have all the sponsorship. Those in a week they do your entire record room for $1,500 and 2 days, 48 hours. That's my pitch. If you're listening, if you're watching HGTV.
I guess the question I have is like, is your obsession with the Beatles, will it ever be quenched? Like, will you ever be like, I've done it, that's enough, that's
Well,
complete, that's all I want?
I'm almost there, except, see, we're on the last legs. As you know, that thing I shared with you of the White Album, we're at the point right now, we just finished the 50th anniversary of the last Beatle record. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it hasn't come out yet, exactly. Let It Be, Get Back was supposed to come out with a movie, a new version, and a box, and it got delayed because of the pandemic until next year. So for the boomers, myself, and younger people, I mean, all these anniversaries are coming out with the Beatles. And this is like yesterday was John Lennon's 80th birthday, and there's that, and there's going to be a Plastic Ono Band, a set of outtakes and things. So yeah, for now, but I'm looking, I hate to say it, I mean, I'm healthy for my age, but I am 66, and I'm looking, and does my son, who's almost 30, want this whole collection? And they're going to be his. But I may start, as my business is dwindling and business is evolving, eventually start selling things through Discogs. I have a friend who died last year, and his stuff was basically sold for cheap because he was too sick to sell it. I don't want to get in that position. I could make good money. It's a lot of work, but selling, like, that's another reason to get stuff in Discogs. It'll be there if I want to sell it, and I can see what prices are.
That was part of my financial plan, to sell my records at a certain age, and it was set in there. I've had to really redo my financial plan now, by the way. But it was a big, because my kids did not want these records. They did not want the CDs whatsoever.
It's a lot to deal with.
It is. And
you haven't been insured. You haven't been insured when the flood comes.
Nope, they were not insured. Not the records. A lot of other stuff was, and government's given me a nice batch of money, but I have to pay that back. So yeah.
You don't have to pay me back for the blue box set, Stephen.
Take that. That was pretty cool. That was like a one of those kind of things.
But I'm curious, Michael, in Germany, do you have a limit to what you're buying, or do you? And as now, with the vinyl craze and everyone's repressing, and obviously Don Was and Tone Poet are seeing they can press things in our acoustic sound series. They can get the license and sell it out immediately, and there's such a demand for all these titles. Like, is there an end in sight, or will you keep amassing all these records as they keep repressing them that you don't own?
I don't have that many records. I don't have so many records. I think if I hear Mazzy's numbers, I'm far away. And please don't forget, I sold around 2,000 vinyls over at Discogs, and all the money I got from those electric avant-garde records, I put into the audiophile editions. That's the transformation. And now, of course, I have my limits. I go through extremes. I did that all my life. I give you that. But of course, I have my limits. But if there will be a new Tone Poet, there has to happen a lot that I don't buy it. I will buy it. I want to listen to it. I want to have it. I want to watch it. I want to touch it. For sure.
Okay, I guess I'm next. I've talked on my channel a lot about time and place, and I always feel, and I feel blessed growing up in the 60s and 70s in San Francisco. But what happened in 66, 67, especially in the whole cliche, everyone's heard the summer of love. Well, I was getting these Beatles and garage band type of records, Syndicate of Sound, Little Girl, Hey Joe by the Leaves, Psychotic Reaction. And a lot of those were South Bay Area bands, but I'd heard of the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead. Those are the two I heard of, and I was a little young to really understand it. I didn't buy the first album of the Jefferson Airplane, and in '66, RCA came and signed them, and that album is really a folk rock album, not a psychedelic record. Little tinges of it, and this is a year before Grace Slick joined. They had a different singer, Sidney Anderson. Well, 67 hits. and the Summer of Love happens through that. And, you know, the press called it that. It was just one of those rare, warm summers without the typical Mark Twain fog of San Francisco all summer. And I started, you know, getting records, these records, and you've all known, we all see them on the VC, but all these records were from San Francisco bands in 67 and 68. And I was buying these. I was riding my bike at 13 to 14 years old to Golden Gate Park, seeing Big Brother and the Holding Company free, the Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead in the Arboretum or the Hall of Flowers in I would see on Haight Street, these bands would play, Country Joe and the Fish. So I'm just going to hold these up. You know, this was the only one that wasn't a debut album. This is her second album. And this is what opened the floodgates for every label to come to San Francisco. This was, I mean, people consider, they talk about the 3 albums of 1967 summer. The first Doors album, Sgt. Pepper and Surrealistic Pillow. Those are considered. The first Grateful Dead record, the first Moby Grape record. So you got Warner Brothers coming and they signed the Dead. Columbia comes and signs Moby Grape, and then a year or 2 later, Santana. Vanguard Records signs Country Joe and the Fish, and they were doing, you know, folk and jazz records before this. East Bay, another Columbia. I mean, it took the Monterey Pop Festival for Clive Davis to see Janis Joplin and sign a Big Brother away from their Mainstream Records contract, which was a small little label, and sign them to Columbia. And with the great artwork, by the way, since the original concept of Four Corners, I'm the guy with design covers and artwork. R. Crumb did this cover, got paid $300 for it.
No, wow.
Fantasy Records was a jazz label and a folk label, and Creedence Clearwater, and that's the record in 1968 that became, eventually, they were the biggest Bay Area band, and they built that beautiful big building, Fantasy Studios, and they call it the house that Creedence built, because that was by far the most successful band after Jefferson Airplane. And we all know, you know, people always forget they're from the Bay Area. El Cerrito, California, right by Berkeley.
Mazzy, one question.
Signs Quicksilver Messenger Service and the first Steve Miller band, which Boz Scaggs was very psyched. This is a beautiful record, recorded in England by Glyn Johns. So this whole psychedelic, I fell in love with psychedelic music and psychedelic artwork. And I got on the mailing list of the Avalon and the Fillmore, and I was too young to go to the shows really, but I'd get all these handbills in the mail.
Wow.
All these posters, and I collect all the books of psychedelic artwork and the artist. And I was really falling in love with art, psychedelic art, graphic arts. And again, I've said this on my channel, I feel I'm an artist without a discipline. And I was collecting these things and archiving them in a way when I had these in scrapbooks, and I finally, in the last 5 years, put them in these baseball card like sleeves and things. And I fell in love with art. And I found that eventually it led me to what I do now with photography and representing and being like an agent and manager for photographers. So I like being around artists. I play guitar, but I was a shitty guitar player. I played, all that stuff. I was a shitty musician, but I love being around the artists, and I'm in awe of people like Michael in Austin here and the photographers I work with. So that whole 67, 68, and then beyond in San Francisco was an amazing moment. And literally, it's like that sense memory again. I was 13 years old. My buddies walking down Haight Street every weekend. We weren't doing drugs. We just liked the smell of patchouli oil, the Indian bedspreads, the strobe lights, the black lights, and all those posters, So, and then of course, the same thing was happening in London with Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah,
and, that was like a parallel thing, the whole UFO club, that Pink Floyd was a house band. So that was a special time. So I started collecting those records as well.
Incredible. Those handbills are great. That is amazing.
I love that stuff. I mean, half the time you can't read, you can't make it out what they say, but they're just gorgeous. You know?
The posters were the best by far. 60s posters, nothing's ever been that good.
And like you, Steve, I collect art books and books,
Yeah.
and I have, you know, psychedelic poster books. I have photo books. I have all kinds of, you know, things related to rock and roll and art. So it got me into the whole. I mean, I can't go to a city without stopping at, if there's a major museum, I'll go check.
Same
it.
here.
Yeah.
Yep, every city.
To me, that's a soothing thing, especially when it's not a weekend, when it's not packed. Walking through a museum, it's like looking, like I've showed those art books or art record covers by Room Gramophone, and it's like they're like modern art museums to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah. My turn.
Next.
Maybe I would love to show you 2 or 3 records which I will never give away, which are very close to me, and 3 records I am asking myself, will this be future classics like the Blue Notes or like Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, and maybe Michael in Texas can say something about them because he knows them also very well. First, one of my big loves as a collector, this is my, of course, look at that. But you know, doesn't matter to me. This is my copy from Kraftwerk, Computerwelt. This walks with me for so many years. Another one, I don't know if you know this group, it's also from Düsseldorf. It's called Deutsch-Amerikanische Freundschaft. You know these guys? Ever heard? Never seen it?
No.
Deutsch-Amerikanische Freundschaft. They have been really big here over in Europe. Also a Düsseldorf group.
I need to get that album so I can try to pronounce it. I just think that would be.
It's very easy to translate. It means German-American friendship in German.
Oh, I because of my American, there's the Wim Wenders film American Friend. I have a copy of video, and it's in. I have a poster that has the German Durch Amerikansky, whatever American, not Kansky. But how do you say American Friend? My American Friend in.
I want to go into this record, and this is one for Michael. You know that, don't you? Eli Kessler.
Yep.
Incredible. If you're into jazz, or it's this one is called Stadium. This is, in my opinion, and this comes from that electronic avant-garde, but it's, maybe Michael disagrees, it's more a jazz album. It's unbelievable. It's one of the best albums in the last 5 years, in my opinion. Eli Kessler Stadium.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. And another one, and this is the pure realm of Michael in Texas, is Carly Malone. You know, I get rid of so many of those electric, avant-garde electronic music, but these 2 I will keep forever because they are so outstanding. Ah, that's her too, yeah.
Wow, you had that right there, Mike. That's pretty good.
I got my collection right at my feet here.
Michael, and Jim, I don't know how good they are, if they're any good or not, but I realize the only Kraftwerk album I still have is a 70s original American of Autobahn. But I just ordered 7 of these reissues that are coming out end of October here of Kraftwerk records. You know, they're colored vinyl, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but for some reason I feel like they almost being electronic. I don't know if it matters if they're.
No. What I have heard from Kraftwerk, but I don't know if it's really true. The last thing I have heard is they did their remodels. They did every record they've done different. And they said those are the only versions who are allowed to put out anymore. So I don't know.
Sounds like a George Lucas thing where you can't have the original Star Wars or something, you know. Really?
I hope it's not
but
true.
I probably won't know the difference because I really don't. I've heard those records, but I don't know them really well.
They are quite different. The originals are quite different than the remodeled one they did in the around 2008, 9, 10. Completely different recordings.
I just been getting into a little bit of playing like Jean-Michel Jarre and that kind of like Oxygene, which I love, and that kind of stuff. It's kind of an ambient. It's almost like commercial ambient, you know, Tubular Bells or something, which is different, obviously. But I just love that.
Vangelis.
Yeah, I've never got into Vangelis, but I appreciate that, you know, almost like soundtracky.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
And I know going along with those records you showed of Callie Malone and Eli Kessler, there's also this guy, the Caretaker, who I know, Steve, you've enjoyed.
Yes.
The minimal avant-garde guy. But yeah, it's curious. These records, they're pretty niche, and they're not by no means mainstream or well-known. Most record stores wouldn't have them, but there is this market. Like the Callie Malone stuff, she sells on Bandcamp, and she made 1,000 copies of the record. They sell out immediately. She does another 1,000. They sell out immediately. Wow. So there's this strange, dedicated following for these avant-garde, like minimal artists that it's pretty interesting to see. And if you're not right on the email list or on the Bandcamp announcement, like you are going to miss it.
This one is over at Discogs for around 100 euros. And they're repressed few, then it doesn't change the price. They are so hard to get, which is strange in a way. I don't understand why they pull out more and let the people have the records.
I do like to support, I mean, artists. You asked Michael about buying records at shows. Now, whenever I go to shows, I buy vinyl copies. It's fun getting them signed, if they're signed, if possible. I showed a couple things yesterday, and I'd gotten Sean Lennon, Les Claypool album signed at a show, and a early Sean Lennon with his girlfriend, the Ghost and the Saber-Toothed Tiger signed. So I love doing that and picking up the signed whenever possible. But obviously there's no shows now. So
do you all feel like it dilutes the original versions or the special versions when they keep repressing a title over and over, or another label gets a license? You know, like how many, obviously for like Miles Davis or Coltrane, it's different, or the Beatles. But for like a smaller artist, I kind of almost, I'm not upset, but I'm just like, oh, it's like this album I worked so hard to get. Like I looked for months and months and months and like checked all these, you know, and then all of a sudden I get it, and then 2 weeks later they repress it, and it takes some of that joy out of it for me.
I can talk a little about that because I know a lot about editions in the fine art world, and it doesn't bother me. And I see a lot of people get pissed about that. You're right, that I pay money for it and everything. With photography, for instance, a lot of times, you know, a photographer will do an edition. They'll do, I have these signed, I collect photographs. That's my next little thing I'm going to show. Photographers that do album covers and photographs. They'll say, okay, here's an edition of this photograph, 11 by 14 in the year 2020. We're going to do 100 editions of the 11 by 14. Then we're going to do another 100 editions of the 16 by 20, and another 100 edition of the 20 by 24. Those are photograph size, and they're signed and numbered, but 1 to 100 of the 11 by 14, 16 by 20, 20 by 24. That's the 2020 edition. Well, maybe there's going to be a 2025 edition, and it's so much. And obviously, the original editions will have a different thing. Like we know Record Store Day has first release. They might be 1,000 colored vinyl. And then the next, you know, the only thing I would do is change them out, whatever's different. These are hand numbered, these first 1,000. The next 1,000 are not hand numbered, and they're not signed. But I understand that concept, and most people who buy them don't, so I can understand why people get pissed. But, you know, you sell it for a price. If they want to go out and buy it on the resale market and, you know, it comes out cheaper later, so be it. That's how I feel, at least.
Yeah. And on the same ticket, like I can never afford an original in good shape of these old Blue Notes. And when the tone poets come out, it's like, oh, that's so wonderful. You can, you know, spend 1% of the original of the value we could buy a perfect copy for, and it sounds great, and you will have that forever. And I love that everyone can have the opportunity to listen to everything at
I'm with you.
any time.
I agree.
Absolutely. It's about listening to the music. And OG's fun, but it's the music. Yep.
Mr. Carlson.
All right, my turn. So how are we? I had three more. How are we doing here?
Go, shoot.
All right. 90s. So we're going to talk 90s. I became a store manager of a Kmart, and I was in charge of the music. Nobody was going to put out that music but me. And I began to buy so many CDs. And of new artists in the 90s, I was averaging probably to 200 to 300 CDs a year because there was no albums. I couldn't get albums where I lived. The record store they only carried CDs. Columbia House, so it was all CDs. But I bought so many CDs that I don't remember the 90s because you never got intimate with anything. You know, every week, if you're bringing home 10 new, and there's only so much time, for most of them, I just never got into them because I never listened to them over and over. There were a few albums. You know, one of them, this was one of the groups, the Stereo Lab. And they've done these beautiful reissues, and this is tomato ketchup or whatever. What is it? Emperor Tomato Ketchup. Loved this thing when it came out. Prodigy, Firestarter. Oh, that one blew me away. But for the most part, if these CDs came out and they didn't have some kind of hook, some kind of song, you know, they got filed. I listened to every one, maybe once, maybe twice. But I was buying too much. And that's kind of the part of record collecting. Sometimes when you hear people, they're buying all this stuff. Are we buying it just to have a lot? And believe I had over 10,000. Or are we buying to listen? It's kind of how I've thought. And so I look at the 90s and I think about how I was collecting. I was just buying like nuts. And I was, buying back catalogs and CDs. You know, you go back, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, all in these CDs. They were coming out with budget ones. It didn't matter. I wanted to get that. I subscribed to College Music Journal through the 90s. That was an infinite source of, this is some great new stuff. So these artists I didn't know about that I was finding through College Music Journal. In the odds, College Music Journal began to suck. The reviews just went to hell, I thought. But so the 90s, and Michael and Austin, you were talking in a recent video about the 90s and you were showing stuff. I think I commented about that I know these groups, but I can't tell you the music because I bought too much of all things. And I never got intimate with it. This was one of the albums, though, that I did get, shall we say intimate. And there were a few other groups that I really loved. U2 was putting out stuff. I knew U2, so I would listen to them more. World Party, they put out, their stuff. But it was a different time for me. When I look back now, I think of the 90s as just too much music and no time to listen to it. And, all those CDs are gone. Does it really matter? No, I didn't know them. So sometimes you can spend too much on too many things. And, kind of my caution to folks when they're buying all this stuff, are you going to listen to it or is it just getting shelved? And I mean, if that's fine, if that's what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with it. It's your collection. It's what you want to do. But you lose some of the music, I think. So that's kind of 90s how I began to kind of change. I just, it's like going drugs or something, I guess. I was taking some hell of drugs. I don't remember the 90s anymore. What was it about? But there was so much going on with all the electronic music. I was liking that. The grunge and everything. Of course, Nirvana, Nevermind, that one, hit me. So, yeah, that's just the change of collecting habits that I had going on then. And it was kind of a mistake, in all honesty.
I totally missed Stereo Lab. And that was my summer obsession this summer. Two people, the archivist and her friend Zach, they came back by for a whack-a-mole earlier in the year before the pandemic. and he said his favorite album is Dots and Loops. I had no idea what he was talking. I was thinking of the video channel. Are you talking about, you know?
Yeah.
And I ended up getting all those reissues, and they're just great, fun cocktail kind of loungy, modern
They are.
French Europe pop, and I love those. But I didn't know them in the '90s. I was raising my kid buying CDs.
Yeah, lots and lots. So, Michael down in Austin.
All right. So I talked about this band Tortoise from Chicago. Some call it post-rock, experimental, avant, jazz stuff. This is on Thrill Jockey Records, which is an independent label based in Chicago. I feel like coming out of the 90s in my adolescence, another Thrill Jockey band was the Sea and Cake. So all these people are all connected, and all these scenes, these bands are touring together. And, you know, when I'm between 18 and 26, 7, I'm going to a concert like once a week at least, and driving all over the state of Texas. And this is actually an Austin band, the American Analog Set. That's one of my favorites. So being in Austin in my 20s, and if you're driving from the East Coast west, especially in the South, there's not a lot of cool places. I mean, New Orleans is great, but from there until you get to the West Coast, there's just a lot of nothing. So a lot of bands came through Austin, and I had the privilege of seeing so many bands. And I think that getting stuff at shows was kind of one of the best ways for me to learn about music, or going to see a band and their opening act. I have no clue who they are, but you have to get a good spot. So you stand close, and like, oh, this band is, I liked them better than the band I came to see sometimes. So I think that from that era moving forward, there's still bands that are putting out records and still groups that are together. This is one by the Duluth, Minnesota band Low, L-O-W. But this is, I don't know, their 11th, 12th record. And they're one band I talk about a lot, that the best sounding live rock band I've ever seen. And they keep changing their sound. They still have the same core, but they keep kind of pushing the envelope in different ways. And I love that. So one collecting thing I do is I love keeping up with these bands that I've always loved, but then discovering new records. Steve, I know you love this one.
Yeah.
Los Lobos.
Yep.
And like you all have mentioned, finding these labels and finding people that I trust. When I see Analog Productions has something back in stock, I know they have such a tight curation of the things they want to release and the quality that maybe I don't love the music, but I will at least check it out, just saying, oh, they're putting this out. The Living Stereo in the classical world, like anything they put out, the Analog Productions does the Living Stereo. Not all of it I will love, but I know it's going to be a amazing pressing and interesting, and kind of going back through all these old records that came out, you know, long before I was a glimmer in my parents' eye. I just am dumbfounded and kind of flummoxed with how much good music there has been in the last 80 years of the recorded music era, and how it keeps getting better. And you know, they keep finding these old tapes or like a different version of something, or it's just, you know, somehow when an artist dies, they go through their estate and through their archives and they find all these tapes and all these recordings that they never knew existed. And how fun is that, you know, posthumously, years and years after these people are gone, that we're still finding the Palo Alto tape from Thelonious Monk from this concert, or these Bob Dylan tapes, or these Beatles demos. There's so much fun in just discovering all of these things that have built up over all these years. And I can't really see an end in sight, especially as, you know, like John Prine dies and Van Halen. Like, I'm sure they're going to find some Eddie Van Halen demos in the next few months, and, you know, that will be put out. It's just, it's so fun to keep up with. And with the internet and with everyone on YouTube talking about it, and these record companies and Record Store Day, and like the momentum just keeps building, and it's just kind of fun to kind of be in the middle of all that.
And you get some of the naysayers like throwing out the terms cash grab and all this. And you don't have to buy it. There are people in the Beatle community that are upset with this new remixed Sean Lennon, Give Me Some Truth, John Lennon thing. The mixes are a whole different mix, and my copy hasn't even arrived yet. But they get upset about it. You have your records. You don't need to buy it.
Exactly.
My argument to that is, right now there are no vinyl versions up till this week of John Lennon's, like a best of in print. So why not? There's a whole, the last one was in 2010, 10 years. There's a new generation buying this stuff. So what? Don't buy it. Don't bitch about it. That's my take. All right.
Yeah, no one's forcing you to buy this. You don't have to have it.
Yeah.
But you can have it if you want it.
I've talked ad nauseum about art and photography and illustration and artwork with music and album covers. Again, the thing about vinyl are the covers. I've been a photo agent for 36 years now, and I fell into it accidentally. And this is my presentation. I picked 5 really quick photographers, and I collect. Not only do I collect records with their cover art, but books, signed books, or prints that I have. I'm not going to show all that, but I have to stand up for this. Since this is a new form of the 4 corners. And I'll start with the photographer who I knew was in San Francisco, Jim Marshall. This is a book of Jim Marshall's. That was Jim Marshall. He did the famous photograph of Johnny Cash flipping off the camera.
Okay.
He did the covers of the Folsom and San Quentin Johnny Cash. He's did Janis Joplin. There you go. That. You've seen his pictures, did Woodstock covers, Grateful Dead, All the Airplane. He grew up in San Francisco. Volatile man, amazing stuff. And the only album I'll show of his, because it's being reissued now, this is original mono, OG mono, is Ballads, John Coltrane. And I was lucky enough to acquire this print. This is taken the same day as Ballads. This is at Gelder's studio during the same session of Ballads by Jim Marshall. Story about this print, this exact copy was owned by drummer Tony Williams, the jazz drummer Tony Williams. Gave it to my photographer Michelle Clement as a gift. She in turn gave it to me years after he died, Tony died, because she didn't want it, and because Michelle photographed 6 years of his covers for Blue Note. Ethan Russell, you've seen Ethan Russell's work. He's an American expatriate that moved to England. He photographed the Rolling Stones. You've seen his work on album covers. He photographed, this is a book that he self-published. You know him because he did the cover of Who's. So this is actually a wonderful cover of John Lennon listening to the playback of the White Album. He did the very last Beatles photo session, which was this at Tittenhurst Park. And he did the Who's Next cover, them pissing on the monolith, as well as many other covers you've seen, Linda Ronstadt album covers. The other one who's a favorite of mine, you all know, probably the most famous, is Annie Leibovitz. And of course, this photograph of John and Yoko, that was photographed the afternoon of his death. That afternoon, they did the photo session, and he died that night. But amazing photographer, obviously. That's that picture, famous picture. Her work is really known, but of course, she did Born in the USA. And then lastly, I'm going to just show Richard Avedon. Richard Avedon was a famous portrait photographer and fashion photographer. I got into him because when I was 13, I sent away for these posters, the cover of Look magazine, and they were on the cover of Stern magazine in Germany, and you could send away for the posters. I still have mine framed. They were, I think, $10 or $15 for all. There were 5 posters. This and the black and white, that's Abby Hoffman. And of course, the rock music cover he did was Simon and Garfunkel, beautiful black and white picture. And this, as you know, has been parodied by all these other artists. Was it Dorfman and what are they called? That electronica artist that copied this cover.
Rudolf Dorfmeister?
Yes, they did a cover of that. So that's it. That's my little photo thing, and that's been an obsession of my collection, collecting art books like that too. So, and because of the album covers, I would read, like probably you a lot. When we had those album covers as kids and growing up, I would read every liner notes. So I knew every studio musician. I knew every engineer. I knew who mastered it. I didn't even know what mastering was. I knew the photographers. I knew what studios they were recorded in, because they always would say, you know, Sterling Sound or Abbey Road or Memphis or Sound City or whatever the famous recording studios. And I just learned all this stuff. And it was really quite the education, especially with photographers and illustrators. I just love that. So that's my presentation. Thank you. And that's what I do for a living. I used to do for a living.
And that's great.
Book
I mean,
portfolios.
all that stuff just informs your collecting and what you're interested. You can find a visual and like, oh, that it moves you, and you want to know what's being played in that moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Bill Graham. Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many albums get sold just because of the artwork?
Yeah.
I mean, I do it constantly.
Oh.
It's just, I'm in a record. I don't have no clue what this is. I like that artwork, that album cover. I buy it. And I'm terrible at that.
Do you
beautiful.
think I knew what I was buying when I saw this was a pure cover buy. I just bought it because of the cover at that time.
Absolutely. I'm terrible at doing that. But that's part of my enjoyment. I like that. And you know, those are just iconic pictures in those books, man. See, those are great. I got a big book on Annie Leibovitz, a bunch of her photography she did a few years ago. At just, yeah.
I have a copy. I try to get signed copies. I was lucky to get a signed, meet Richard Avedon, got his book signed, Ethan Russell, Annie Leibovitz is signed. And I could name 20 other photographers that I have, but of course, that's for another video. I need to find a photographer to do a joint video with.
Yeah. There are still some out there, I think.
Yes. Okay.
So my turn again, I think. And on my turn now, I will go a little bit into the path that Steve took, the 90s, the CDs. And we really need some time now, because I'm showing all my CDs I bought in the 90s. Steve, your turn.
You totally missed that era.
I think you caught the Mazzy snarky disease, the virus. You caught my snarkiness.
Really?
That sounds
that's an upgrade.
That sounds like a conceptual thing I would do. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, since the flood, I have yet to buy a CD unless it was in a box set. Now, even my box sets have been on vinyl. I haven't bought any of it. It just, I don't even have a CD player hooked up yet. So, yep.
I still like CD. I mean, when I'm doing things, I put it on, and especially like minimal or classical music usually. Although, well, so is that it? Really, Michael? Okay.
Really?
Okay.
No, I'm not.
Steve?
All right. Does that look familiar there, Michael? Okay. Elvis Costello, and sorry for the glare, this year's model. I'm showing this. It's kind of, actually, it was, Michael had a video, and he was showing a bunch of these, and I commented, says, wow, that's in MoFi? I didn't know that. And I wasn't aware of that. And then he sent me a link that I could pick this up.
Of course he did.
And this is kind of where my journey's at right now. Okay, when you look at it, I've limited my space. I'm not going to expand into other rooms. Last week, for the first time in my entire life, I brought down record albums to my record store to get credit. Put them on credit because I'm going to buy something else. Some of these albums I had recently purchased. But I knew when I listened to them, says, I just don't think I'm going to listen to these again. Yeah, and it's kind of how I've began to look at things as I pull out a record. How often do I want to go back to this and listen? Now, last week I showed this one from a Danish guy, U Florenzen. I know I'm going to go back to that again and again and again. It appealed to me, but there's some other stuff. Why bother? Something like this, I used to have every Elvis Costello, but I'm not going to anymore. So I'm picking the very, very best that I want. I thought about an original, but then I was showing this lo-fi. Well, by God, I want to have this because I love this album so much. And I might buy maybe 4 Elvis Costello albums that I feel are the ones that mean the most to me. Now, I still blind buy like a maniac. I can't help it. I'm compulsive. I go into a record store and I got it. As we were talking about the artwork, I want that. I have no idea. I buy it because of the artwork. But I'm only going to have limited space. So eventually, when I have it full, one of these bookcases is going to go, and I'm going to put one more tower. I don't need it yet, but I'm going to. It's going to be absolutely kind of limited. There's these box sets coming out now. U2's putting out one, for one of my all-time favorite U2 albums, all that we left behind, I believe, and it's like 11 albums in that one. And I was thinking about buying it, but how I think now is, do I need all 11 albums? Will I listen to all those 11 and say, gosh, this is great? Or am I blowing my money when I could buy a couple of these that I will listen to more? And though that is my favorite U2 album, I just passed on it. Why? I'm going to go with something that I really, really want. And I was in a shopping again as I go to my local record store, and everything I pull up now, it comes to this fact that am I buying this for one song, or am I buying it because I love the whole album? And if it's just one song, I'm going to put it back. I'm not purchasing it, and so I'm limiting myself more. It's cost me kind of more money right now because you three showing, really showing some great stuff out there, really getting me interested in these better pressings. But it's the way I want to go because I'm going to limit my space. Why not have some of the very best? And I'm getting older, so that's really what I want to have. It's not about the big collection anymore.
You're not downstairs anymore, are you?
No. My in fact, I want to do a video down there because it's still just studs. It's all studs. I haven't done a thing with it. I'm up now in my office, and it's a tiny office. I mean, it's not very big. It's an old spare bedroom. So and my wife says, well, you can go to the other bedroom, which is a lot bigger, the other spare bedroom. I says, no, I want to keep myself limited now. Because for my whole life, until the day of the flood, I was going to have a giant record collection, and it made me extremely happy, and I loved it. And I had never sold a single album in my entire life. Never brought. I had crap I hated. I kept it because it was part of my collection. It was a library. I guess that's the best way to say it, right? It's your library. You come, maybe 20 years down the line, I'm going to say that super crappy album, I want to listen to it finally. I'd have to find it, but I know it's not going to happen now. And that's really where I found a lot of peace at what I'm doing, because what I'm buying is just really good. It might be that Cramps OG. That's going to make me extremely happy. Do I need another Cramps album? I might not, because that's the one I want to have. A Zamrock box set makes me super happy. So it's kind of a neat journey to totally change how I thought about record collecting. And I'm excited about it. And some of this stuff coming, the tone poets. I'm not buying every tone poet. I'm picking and choosing what I think I'm really, really going to want to have. and bringing that in. And obviously, I'd like to, these lo-fis and the analog productions. Michael, you told me about the Joe Jackson ones, and I went and I bought a couple of those. So, it's a different way for me, completely an opposite direction. But it's the right thing for me to do at this time in my life. And it wasn't hard to weed out these records and bring them down. It really wasn't. I've done that with books too now. I've gone through and I've taken books, says I'll never look at that book again. I'm going to bring it down, and I give it to the library, donate it down to them. They can sell it. So, that's kind of where I'm going with since the flood. And, we'll just keep looking for the best.
I think I totally understand what you say, because when you go to such a traumatic event, in a way, what other choice do you have? The other choice would be you take the next 10 years or 15 years and buy records and records and records. And in 10 years, you are at the point where you have been 10 years before. I don't think that a collector works that way. I think you need a new input, a new goal, a new direction, to not do the same thing, the same stuff all over again. Yeah. I think that's also a very important point.
Great. And Michael, down in Austin, you'd shown your collection, and you have this set space. This is my space that I'm having, and you've been very rigorous with that. And I found that really inspirational. My goal in life was to have Mazzies. That was my goal. So, oh well, I lost that now, Mazzy. To have all that beautiful CD walls and the album walls, and I had it for a while, but it's okay. So that's where I'm at.
I'll go next. Kind of echoing off of what Steve just said, that the way he's kind of shifted his collection and his thought process behind what he keeps and what he buys and the money he spends on this is unique to him, and it's right for him. And that's the beautiful thing about music and collecting records, that there's no rules. Like, do what you want. Have as many as you want, have as little as you want. If you don't listen to it, get rid of it. If you want to keep it for years down the road, keep it. Like, that's the beauty. Like, I think I want to talk about this record. This is one of the first jazz records I bought, and this is the double 45 analog productions. And when I bought this, I was like, there's also the 33, which is cheaper. It probably sounds as good. There's all these other pressings from all over the world. It's like, people always have the argument of having to get up to change the record.
That's me.
Every 10 minutes. And like, I don't mind that. I know Michael in Germany doesn't mind that. Some people really have a problem with that. Some people want to put on a CD and not think about the record player at all during certain times of the day or activities. And that's what's so great about it. It doesn't matter. Like, it's individual. It makes whatever makes you feel good. That's why there's so many types of music and so many labels putting out different things. Like, some people don't like female vocal based music. Some people do. That's how beautiful this world is, and like that we all can exist and get along. Like, there's Michael in Germany isn't wrong for spending $500 on a record, and you're not right for finding an OG copy of a record in a dollar bin. Like, there's such a wide gamut of ways to collect and avenues that, hey, at the end of the day, you love the music, you feel alive because of it, you're happy. That's it. That's all there is.
Well said. And everyone will have certain. I mean, you get on those channels, and some people think this is the way you have to do it. This is the right way, and it is. It's whatever. If you go and you pull out a record that makes you happy, there you go. You have your collection. Well said.
Mazzy.
This is a label showcase. We talked about collecting, and one aspect of collecting I've seen some people do, especially Michael in Germany, are collecting a label. I know some people will collect the Blue Notes or the Tone Poets or the Impulse. Also, they'll collect certain punk labels. and the like. And in the last about 2 years ago, I was watching Amoeba's What's in Your Bag. And I love those. And I found what was really interesting is watching those artists that I had no idea who they were, or some of these metal artists that I just didn't like, but watching what they were picking really interested me. And I wish I could remember who it was. And within the same week, one of the guys, and I don't know anymore what it was, showed, talking about analog Africa. And one of the artists showed volume 1, and now I can't find it here, but this is volume
Oh man,
of African Screen Contest. This is the second one. There's 2 volumes of this.
volume 1.
And they played a clip, which was great on those videos. And I went down to, I was in San Francisco just coincidentally, and I went to Amoeba and the Hate, and they had 1 copy of it, and I picked it up. I couldn't, and then I heard another one was coming out, and I was driving through Oregon to California and from Seattle, and I found volume 2 in a small store in Eugene, Oregon. And since then, I've collected mostly through Bandcamp. Occasionally, I get locals that buy these records. Have about 25 of their records.
Wow.
Also, my friend at the same week, when I first heard that, Amanda, the archivist, turned me on to another one of their records. And these are out of Germany. A guy in Germany curates these, and he goes and he pays the royalties. He finds tapes whenever possible, or early pressings or acetates. And you know, they're not audiophile, but they have great books and covers and packages. And I mean, I'm not going to go through them all, but this has been, again, it's probably an obsession, but these covers are amazing. Some are comps. They're from Senegal. They're from Peru. They're from different, you know, from the African continent as well, different amazing things. Everything from 50s to 60s, sort of guitar, psychedelic soul to dance music. I know Steve has been picking up these records.
Just played that one today.
Yeah, they're amazing, and every one has something worthwhile.
Yes.
And some of the books, I'm not going to pull out a book, but these books are like amazing what they put into it and the information. And reading the interview of, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name right now, whose label it is. He goes to search these out. Sometimes he writes within the liner notes how he found this person. And these records, there were thousands of records in a tin hot roof on the second floor of a building. And they worked out a deal over breakfast and worked out you know, some kind of commission or some kind of royalty deal. And they're just amazing. So my next thing is African Scream Contest. And for some reason, volume 1 is misfiled because it's not here. So
about volume 1, I can't find that. I've looked, and that thing goes for a lot of money now.
yeah, I mean, it's and so now I'm on, you know, the Bandcamp thing. When you do that, I have one coming next week, and I forgot even what it was. Every time I get an announcement, and they're like $25, $35, so they're not crazy money. Many of them, and they come FedEx from Germany, so they come like in 4 days or 3 days. And you pay for another $10 for shipping. But to me, it you know, so you're paying $35 to $40 for a double record. I think it's great. And you're supporting these artists and these labels, beautifully curated music. They're just make you feel good, funky, dancey, soulful, some psychedelic, but highly recommended. Bandcamp is the way to go for that. And you get immediate downloads, you know, through Bandcamp. It's kind of nice too.
Steve, you're going to kill me. I sold my part 1 and 2 yesterday over at Discogs.
Oh,
I didn't know that you don't have it. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I have part 2, but yeah, part 1 I'd looked, and it's like, wow, it's going for pretty good money there. So
I think this guy sits in Frankfurt here in Germany.
Did you ship it?
What?
Did you ship the record copy of it, or Red?
Yeah, I shipped. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're sold out, and you could ship it to Nebraska.
Yeah. Not easy. Not nearly next to impossible to ship nowadays from Germany to America.
Yeah,
it's terrible at the moment.
It's a mess out there.
It is.
we're almost in our last round. Oh, you got to finish, Michael. Germany.
I only have one record. As always, I show one electric recording company because for me, those electric recording companies are, how shall I put it? They are the essence of today's habits in collecting audiophile vinyls in the best and in the worst sense. You know, gone within minutes, very expensive from the beginning, but on the other hand, incredible sounding, beautiful editions with so much effort and love put into them. So those are very good examples to show where we are in this audiophile genre nowadays. I think the electric recording company is a good showcase for the good, the bad, and the ugly in one label. Great editions, but very hard to get. And when they are out there, they shoot up in prices, sometimes dramatically, for especially the classical editions. So that's where we are now with those audiophile stuff. So, and nice. I think electric recording company is a good example for that market.
And you've spoken to me, and you've spoken in the past, that the technical capabilities of the machinery they're using, if you're listening to it through a mediocre or low quality system, you're not going to hear that. Is it worth it unless you have a really nice system to get this?
In that case, I will go so far and say, don't put all that money in one record if your system is not really good. Take Analog Productions, MoFi, Sams, or Tone Poets. You will hear the advantage on nearly every system, I think. But with those, it's not worthwhile. Just buy a few MoFis and you will have more fun than you have as you buy one electric recording company.
It's good.
Okay. Final round, Steve.
All right. I had a MoFi of this album, but oh well, that's all gone. In the early aughts, I had a neighbor move in. He was a jazz musician. And we're talking music. They say, he's a jazz musician. Now, I knew nothing about jazz, but I just like to talk music. So he goes, can I look at your record collection? Sure, come on down. So here we go again. Okay, I invite probably the second person ever to come look at my record collection. And he's looking, and I've specially built cabinets. I've redone a basement just for my record. And he goes, where's the jazz? And I look, I go, Louis Armstrong, you mean? He goes, no, the jazz. I go, I don't know. So he brings me over to his house, and he gives me Kind of Blue and Bitches Brew in CD. And that was my gateway to the drug of jazz, and changed again how I collected music. Because jazz was just old people, even older than those Beatles people, that's how old the people who listen to jazz were. And I had no interest, but I had no idea. And that's our problem. I think even on channels, a lot of people, they don't know jazz because you don't listen to it. So I took those two things home, and I was so blown away. And also, this guy had a big collection, so he just began feeding me more. Bella Fleck, that would come in, and banjo jazz, that's pretty damn cool. And it changed. And so now suddenly I'm buying all this jazz. A lot of it was in CD. And but I began in the aughts when albums began to come back and you actually could see, hey, that's an album. I began to buy some, but still a lot of this was in CD. By the way, bagpipe jazz sucks. If you've never listened, just don't. If it says bagpipe and jazz, that was bad. That's bad stuff, man. But this album was just, it's like one of my most favorite albums of all time. This and Kind of Blue, and it blew me away. The funk and everything, and Mazzy with those Analog Africa. You hear that, and you hear the rhythms and that going on in here. I mean, the African rhythms are incredibly good. And so this thing, I never tire of it. I have the whole thing on my phone, so in the car I can play it all the time. And it's totally different than Kind of Blue. And I'm not a fusion guy, but Miles' stuff, because he had rhythm, and it's just that what's going on underneath is that hypnotic drums and the percussion, and it just has that kind of feel. And so really, really liked it. So I changed again and began really, that was my journey into jazz by another person kind of just basically saying my collection sucks. So I've spent a lot of life being told my music sucks.
Did you like it
in a good way?
Like Bitches Brew when you first heard it?
I did. And it's kind of crazy because I knew nothing of jazz. It's just that underlining the hypnotic rhythm underneath. It appealed to me some way because I've always been a rhythm person. I have no rhythm. If you see me on the dance floor, you can tell that. Worst thing in the world, go to a wedding and someone videos you dancing. You're pretty sure you're looking pretty good until you see the video. And then you go, oh my God, that was embarrassing as hell. But just happened at my son's wedding. So yeah, I did, man. It appealed, Kind of Blue blew me away, but this one also blew me away. So it was kind of odd to go that way. Now, I tried to listen to some of the other fusion and the free jazz. There's no way. I can't, I'm not interested in free jazz. I like some kind of structure, and I can't find it in free jazz. So, yeah, it really made a difference in my collecting. I began to buy less. I bought a lot less, but I began to experiment more with different types of music. African music
came out when I was 16, 1970, and I just did not get it. And I returned it next week. And then 5 years later in record stores, someone started playing it, and I fell in love. It took me 21, I turned or so, and I fell in love with it finally, but it took a while.
Well, I would agree. If I was 16 and I heard that, I mean, I was listening to Bachman Turner Overdrive. They ruled, man. They were awesome. This would have been, huh? What's up with that? They don't even sing a song on the whole thing. So yeah, it's just, and then of course you get into jazz. So what happens? You look at every player. Oh, Herbie Hancock, better buy that. Paul Chambers, better buy that. And I mean, that's the problem with jazz. It's just that's one hell of a rabbit hole that has all these different tunnels as you start going after the different artists. I've just never seen anything quite like it. Just incredible. So there it is. God bless it.
Fell between the cushions.
I was looking online trying to find that, and I just wasn't locating it. And Michael had the last one known in existence and sold it. That's
what you compare. You mentioned the connection's obvious, but after those African records with Miles Davis, obviously the African sounds that he was listening to, and that's when he was with Cecily Tyson. Was turning on to this African music and African dress, and was a whole different thing for him.
It was, yes, and
not just Tyson. I'm sorry,
Betty
Davis.
Yeah, Betty Davis. Yep.
Wrong wife.
Yes, the 1 year marriage there, but that guy was tough to live with. No doubt.
It influenced him. I mean, yeah, that's a whole other story. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Austin.
So talking about going back through old artists and old labels, I'm also there's so many labels and there's so many things to discover. You just kind of have to take it one step at a time. And one thing I love doing is trying an album or trying an artist, and sampling it online. If I like it enough, I'm like, oh, I think I would want this. Getting it. If I don't love it or don't want it, I can get rid of it. It's easy, as Michael Ludwigs knows. You can sell things on Discogs very easily. But one label and one series I'd never explored in the jazz world is the Mosaic So this is the first one I've purchased. This is a four disc box set, 53 and 54. So obviously it's mono, but pressed from the original analog tapes, mastered by Kevin Gray. This was Michael Kuskuna's project, and there are a lot of these. There's, I don't know, a couple dozen of, and a lot of them are even bigger. They do a lot of the Blue Note recording artists where they have all, like the Ike Quebec one, for instance, is all of his 45s all compiled into a 6 LP set. But I just listened to this for the first time yesterday, and it's great. So there's just this wealth of music in the world, and there's so much to discover, and like just finding a simple thing like this and looking back and like there's nothing greater. It's just the best.
Mosaic are
know,
great.
That's
I
it.
only have CDs of theirs, like the 18.
You guys have any of the Mosaic boxes?
I only have them on CD. I have 3, but my favorite is the Nat Cole Trio, 18 CDs. On vinyl, it goes for $1,000, 27 LPs. Because they do, because Kuskuna curated basically all the takes. It's not just the proper albums.
Right.
I have a Django,
a lot of them,
a Lee Morgan, but all on CD, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Michael,
some of
them
are still in.
I was gonna say, when you talk
sorry.
about discovering things like that, I was like your group. It was something. Now your group was a total blind buy. The Moria, I no idea. I just like the album cover, and I bought it, and I go, God, this is great, and I began buying more of it. After when I had the flood though, and I didn't know that was Michael's group even. All of a sudden, he sends me these albums, and I just go, what the hell? That's his group. But it was through the learning, just trying something, and you suddenly go, what an experience, what a journey this music is. It was so exciting. Yeah.
That's wild. I didn't really know that you had heard of us before I sent you the copies.
I did. I saved 2 of your records. I saved 400 albums out of, the 8,000 or so, and 2 were yours.
Wow.
The covers are gone, but they're in the white because that's how good the music was.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah. So now it's in a plain white, but you actually resupplied me, so I'm good.
Okay, good.
Okay, my last one. We've been talking endlessly on these videos about Music Matters Jazz and Tone Poets and the Blue Note stuff. And I got into jazz in the 70s. Again, my experience was my roommate Brooks, my Jazz Shit Brooks roommate, who we'd done those videos with, and working in record stores, and then working for ABC Records. So I had access to the whole Impulse catalog. So I got into my 20s, 23 years old, learning about all this great music. And so I'm just gonna I'm gonna go on location here for a moment, move my camera, because I've been getting almost all the Tone Poets, Joe Harley, who was a half of Music Matters Jazz, Kevin Gray, and these are beautiful, as we all know, tipped on covers, analog for the most part. And these are my Tone Poets.
Wow.
I'm not gonna say anything about them, but amazing cover art, amazing extra gatefolds with session photography from the Francis Wolff archive that is actually owned now by Michael Kuskuna. Him and his wife bought the archives from Francis Wolff's widow. So I don't need to show these because you know them all. This is my card from when I worked in record stores. Our record store had these, and I got a whole set of them back then. So that's all I'm going to say about those. But that's been a major part of my collecting. I got into Music Matters about 4 years ago. I started, but I didn't get them all like Michael. But I feel I got in early before they got crazy expenses. Although I have bought a few, and I've gotten most of the SRXs. So I have about 70 or 75 Music Matters Jazz. So the jazz thing has been a thing. And instead of trying to find smelly, expensive, musty, moldy copies of Blue Note, and I always use that as a kind of a joke, but there's some truth to it. And I don't want to spend like 50 or 100 bucks. I'd rather get something that will sound different than the originals, but they'll sound theoretically more like the original tapes. So more in the audiophile world. So that's my final collecting section.
That's a great comment, though. Instead of out there trying to find that really old expensive stuff, just that stuff, it's beautiful, it looks great, it sounds phenomenal, go that route. And yeah, that's
It
kind
works
of
for
more
me.
how,
Yeah, and they're not cheap, but and you could argue, say, well, now they're twice the price, but I'm not paying twice the price or 3 times the price. And Michael in Germany has talked about this a lot, about how they go up. But you know, I've got most of them at the list. I think there's only one I paid over for. Otherwise, I get them as, you know, again, not cheap, but you know, SRXs are $75 or $79, whatever. So.
very nice.
Do you all know, has Blue Note announced the Tone Poet series to extend into next year?
Yes.
I don't know.
Or
Yeah.
I know
It's going at least through 2021, 22, at least.
Great.
So we'll see if what else. Like obviously they're not doing the BN80s because 80 years is over. But they'll probably do special editions, special things. Who knows what? You know. I mean, they see the writing on the wall. They see what they can do, and now,
exactly.
you know, with all these other things. Should we hold? Why don't we all pick a record, hold it up for our that we can use for our screen grab, something that graphically works within your frame, that represents what you just showed. And this is a behind the scenes because everyone else is seeing this right now, even though we don't know what it's going to be. You guys know more because you saw it.
Oh wait, oh, gosh, hold on, guys.
Michael.
Let's go with this one.
Yeah.
Get a little glare. Can you pull your record back a little bit, Mr. Carlson? Yeah. No. Yeah, perfect. Ooh, Julie London. Freeze.
Where does she suddenly come from?
Okay, I think that works, right?
Okay. So, my final words. You know, Michael in Texas showed the mosaic box, and yet again, I'm influenced by the VC. And this influence from the VC in the last couple of months, maybe a year, is so huge. I don't know if I have ever been so influenced by a single medium like the VC. This mosaic box, you know, when we have done this video, the next thing I'm opening Discogs and we'll look up that mosaic box. I'm 100% sure. And that's because, for my final words, I take an example from nowadays. And that's what influenced me the most nowadays. Mazzy's video, Michael, Steve, and a lot more channels. They are really influential, and the music industry has to think about the VC, I think, because some of those channels are quite important as information sources, I think. And they are very, if you know them, they are very reliable information sources, more than a lot of those newspapers and magazines who are sometimes biased, I think. So
I hope people made it to the end to hear that from you, because this is almost 2 hours, I think, this time.
really?
So much for an hour.
So you're gonna have to fix your Dropbox thing, because I might have to go Dropbox here. This is, I love you guys. I love doing this. I love learning about music and all the other men and women in the vinyl community. I've learned.
Mazzy, I told you once, it was so lonely as an audiophile over here in Germany before I all met you.
Well, that's the thing. I love that I have a big collection. I'm able to show my collection. And every time I do those whack-a-moles, I listen to almost every time after I listen to those records. So those are records that I maybe haven't heard in a while, and I pull them out, and it's random for me, and I can knock it off. And shit, if I don't know about it, I make it up, and nobody knows the difference, except there's always someone who does actually in comments. But it's a fun way to pull from your collection, and especially when I was able to have the luxury to have guest sewers do that. I love when I have guests pulling records to listen to, because I like all the music, because it's there in theory, it's nice to have someone else. I wish you could all come here for a whack-a-mole sometime, but you know.
It would be great.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, kind of echoing on what everyone's already said, just the communication, just in the comments alone. Every video I watch, I look at the comments, or every video I make, someone's suggesting something or commenting something I had no clue about. Every time I watch Michael's video, my bank account goes a little lower. You know, there's, no, I'm just kidding. But I'm saying, you know, there's so much community. It's a vinyl community. Like we're all in this because we love music and we love listening to music and we love discovering music, and it's just such a beautiful thing that, you know, a few years ago I didn't even know existed. So now here we are.
That's funny. I have this, like, I don't know if it's a superstition, but it's not a superstition, but I can't say hi, hello, VC. And I know Michael and you guys say that. I got to say vinyl community. I got to say the whole thing, because also I'm thinking that there's a lot of people stumbling across here. Like they say, what the fuck, excuse me, is VC? I didn't know for like 6 months what VCLT meant. You know, I thought it was that panty line that women have on their, you know, underwear or something. Isn't it something like that? VPL, visible panty line. That's a Woody Allen.
Mazzy.
No, I got to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, all I can say is, you know, my record collecting's been a solo. It's been by myself my whole life, because I really never know. None of my friends were really record buyers except Jeff Bigelow, who told me I suck. But it's been by myself. And then you get into the VC and it does make a difference. And suddenly you find out there's more than one person that buys records. Now, my wife hates all three of you. I just want to be honest, because it's cost me more money. So you're just, you know what, she probably wanted to go off this weekend, I think, to bed and breakfast, but I said, I'm talking to you guys instead. So don't expect anything good from her, okay? Just, if you see Patty Carlson, take a look at the package first before you open.
Okay.
Most comments I got on my channel, I like your content, but my wife hates you, Michael. Terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm going to push the end button here in a minute here. I love you all. I love you out there. Put comments. There'll be links to all the channels. In fact, these will be on all of our video.
All of our channels. Thank you so much, Steve. Pleasure to meet you. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Mazzy loves you.